Larry, you do realize now that we, this group of women you so heartlessly abused over such a long period of time, are now a force and you are nothing. Both USA Gymnastics and the United States Olympic Committee have been very quick to capitalize and celebrate my success. But did they reach out when I came forward? No.
Perhaps you have figured it out by now, but little girls don't stay little forever. They grow into strong women that return to destroy your world. Sitting on my living room couch, I listened to you tell me, no one should ever do that, and if they do, you should tell someone. Well, Larry, I'm here, not to tell someone, but to tell everyone.
She took her own life because she couldn't deal with the pain anymore. It'll be 10 years in March that I lost my baby.
Hello class. Our video will discuss the unethical practices of the USA Gymnastics organization regarding Larry Nassar, the longtime team doctor that was employed by Michigan State, along with the USA Gymnastics organization. This next video will discuss how this organization failed to protect the victims and also how he got away with this for so many years.
There is now nowhere left for you to hide, Larry.
More than 160 women say Larry Nassar sexually abused them. It's one of the worst sexual abuse scandals in the history of sports. And it went on for more than 2 decades. How did he get away with it?
My real interest, of course, with dance and gymnastics is my role with USA Gymnastics.
Nassar had celebrity-like status in the elite gymnastics and sports medicine world. USA Gymnastics gave him countless awards, he was inducted into Michigan State University's Hall of Fame, and governors appointed him to state licensing boards. He even secured a patent for an ankle brace he invented. Nassar's patients felt honored to be treated by the best of the best. Nassar typically carried out his abuse under the guise of a medical treatment. He hijacked a rare pelvic therapy that involves vaginal penetration and used it to treat all sorts of ailments. He ignored protocols such as using a glove, asking consent, or having a medical chaperone present. In the training camps of elite gymnastics, where coaches are notoriously hard on athletes, Nassar manipulated girls into believing he was a trusted friend, advocate, and even their protector.
You have to protect your athletes. You have to let them know that we care. You have to not let them know, but let them feel it. Let them understand it. Let them breathe it.
He put my picture up on his wall with the Olympians. I thought I mattered to Larry.
You had me so wrapped around your finger, and I still trusted you so much. Even when I was a sophomore in college, and you were the only person I called to help me make the decision to end my gymnastics career due to my injuries.
It's still unclear who knew what when, but for decades, Nassar's employers focused on their reputations and failed to safeguard the young women in their care. When USA Gymnastics got a complaint about Nassar in 2016, the organization paid the gymnast $1.25 million to stop her from speaking about the abuse. Complaints about Nassar's treatments reached officials at Michigan State University as early as 1997, the Detroit News has reported. That's 20 years before the prize doctor was terminated. MSU has said that no one at the university believed that Nassar committed sexual abuse prior to the newspaper reports in the summer of 2016. Nassar's victims say that if the university had investigated the first complaint, scores of young girls may have escaped the doctor's abuse.
Larry Nassar did not arise in isolation. Rather, we saw the worst sexual assault scandal in history unfold because a predator was left in power for decades. Despite warning signs, despite red flags, despite direct reports of assault.
In 2016, what seemed just a moving pebble became over the next few years a thunderous rock slide as gymnasts and other athletes courageously came forward to reveal the truth. First one, then another, and another, then dozens and dozens, until over the next few years, hundreds publicly shared that USA Gymnastics and Michigan State University's Dr. Larry Nassar had been using his position and reputation to take advantage and sexually abuse them in the name of healthcare. Most of this had happened while the victims were children and teens. Over the course of those few years, the bravery of speaking truth to power resulted in the firing, the trial, and the conviction of Dr. Nassar, and multiple resignations of USA Gymnastics executive board members and Michigan State University leaders and staff. it came out that there had been years of questions, complaints, and accusations, but these had garnered little reaction, as they were mostly ignored, swept under the rug, and covered up. Over and over, organizational reputation was deemed more important than the welfare of individuals. The disturbing story continued as recently as last week, when former USA Gymnastics coach John Geddert, facing 24 charges that included emotional and sexual abuse of his athletes, committed suicide prior to turning himself in.
According to court transcripts and data collected from the Dr. Larry Nassar case, it is estimated that in a span of 3 decades, Nassar molested over 150 girls and women. Court release information shows that 417 athletes were involved in the lawsuit against the U.S. Gymnastics. 156 female athletes gave victim impact statements in court. The hearing was expected to last 4 days, with 88 victim impact statements. However, more women and girls came forward to speak. In total, 156 women and girls made statements in over 7 days span. Court decisions and settlements. In February 2018, Nassar was sentenced to a minimum of 40 years and a maximum of 175 years in a Michigan State prison. In addition, 60 years for federal child pornography crimes. MSU reached a $500 million settlement with more than 332 alleged victims. Under the terms of agreement, the school will pay $425 million to those 332 claimants. $75 million will be set aside in the trust fund for any future claimants who allege sexual abuse by Nassar. USA Gymnastics settlement was half the MSU amount of $250 million. The average compensation for 517 plaintiffs will be between $250,000 to $300,000 for each individual. Research on sports abuse studies in the U.S. indicate that abuse occurs in all sports. These studies indicate 40 to 50% of athletes have experienced anything from mild harassment to severe abuse. Research suggests that sexual abuse in sports impacts between 2 to 8% of all athletes. 90% of child sexual abuse, the victims know the perpetrator in some way. Some of the indicators of possible abuse in sports include, but are not limited to, change in behavior, missing practices, illness, loss of interest, withdrawal, and the child performing significantly below his or her abilities.
Our recommendation to the USA Gymnastics organizations and similar organizations for preventing sexual harassment and abuse at any level would be to first implement, socialize, and enforce strict sexual harassment policies and procedures for preventing or reporting further cases. The first and most basic policy to implement is a zero tolerance policy on sexual harassment. The Employees' Responsibilities and Rights Journal from 2018 states that employees were more likely to report observed instances of sexual harassment when the company's stated policy is explicitly zero tolerance for sexual harassment, compared to when it is a standard policy or when no policy is made known. This would have been helpful to use for these young gymnasts who were scared to report what was being done to them or that did not fully understand what was being done to them. If any colleagues of Dr. Nassar or other bystanders had seen or been suspicious of what was happening to these young girls, they would have been more likely to report and advocate on their behalf. Implementing these policies as a first step would ensure that as they build a more extensive process to prevent further abuse, that at least they have policies in place to protect their gymnasts and employees in the meantime. Also, these policies would need to establish a safe, confidential, and clearly defined reporting process for those who need to step forward and report instances of sexual harassment. Our recommendation for a second step for USA Gymnastics would be for them to hire a third party to act as an ethics committee to oversee their process in creating a safe environment going forward. This committee would evaluate what is needed within the organization to create a safer environment. They would determine what policies and procedures would be effective for this type of organization, which involves both children and adults, and would not be blinded by the biases that internal leadership may have to maintain an upstanding reputation. This would make the process much more transparent and effective, ensuring long-term success. This third-party committee should also be in charge of handling any reports of abuse or harassment. This again would ensure that all reports are properly investigated and substantial findings would be shared and acted on. Our third recommendation for this organization would be to administer sexual harassment training to their employees, gymnasts, and parents of gymnasts so that all people associated with USA Gymnastics are aware of their policies and how to report instances of abuse or harassment. Since many gymnasts are young in age, they would also need to establish what age for this training would be appropriate, while also finding a way to make sure that these girls are educated early enough to feel comfortable enough alerting adults when they are in uncomfortable situations. Finally, USA Gymnastics would need to create a culture immersed in virtue ethics, a largely Aristotelian moral philosophy that is concerned with clarifying what people should be like to be able to live a good life. Creating this type of culture within their organization would ensure that leaders in this organization would lead and make decisions with virtue in mind, that they would choose to do the right thing in all situations. This would also create a trickle-down effect and cascade virtuous behavior from the top down in the organization. According to the 2013 Journal of Business Ethics, a vocational virtue ethic view will place strong emphasis on the importance of moral leadership within a company in order to promote a shared sense of specific calling among all employees. A moral leader, according to vocational virtue ethic view, is someone with a strong sense of specific calling who embodies the virtues to an exemplary degree and who seeks to foster these virtues in others, especially through encouragement and leading by example, such that others are inspired to imitate him or her. These first 4 steps would set the USA Gymnastics organization to create a strong foundational action plan for preventing further cases of sexual harassment and abuse. It would create a culture where employees and gymnasts feel safe reporting for themselves and advocating for others, and would ensure that reports that are made, that the people who report them know that they will be taken seriously and not fear retaliation, and they would also know what outcomes of any investigations are. Creating a future that is safe for these athletes and all that are there to help them and train them going forward.